Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few plays I look to buy and trade for this week. The first player, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. Bijan Robinson, he's been a solid back majority of the season, but the last couple weeks the numbers have gone down and goal line touchdowns have been taken where Tyler Algier has vultured him the last few weeks. Here is Bijan Robinson. So right now, while his numbers are down, I still think you're going to have to pay a decent price for him. The workload's still been okay for Bijan Robinson, even though you want to see it go up a little bit more. Week 8 versus Miami, 9 carries, 25 yards, 3 catches, 23 yards, a fumble loss. Week 9 at New England, 12 carries, 46 yards, 8 catches, 50 yards. In Week 10 in Indianapolis, 17 carries, 84 yards, 2 catches, 4 yards. So like I said, the numbers have been down over the last few weeks here for Bijan Robinson, but definitely one of the more talented running backs in the league, and obviously a great dual threat out of the backfield. So right now, while his touchdowns have been vultured and his numbers have dropped just a bit, he's a perfect buy low player because Week 11, a good matchup versus Carolina. Week 12, good matchup with the Saints, and he's got some decent matchups at playoff time as well in fantasy football. So this week, I would try to go out there and make a deal for him. Next player, Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's definitely had a down year, obviously, Xavier Worthy, where he got drafted in most fantasy leagues, and now with Rashee Rice back, obviously targets and looks going to be away from him, and we've seen that over the last couple weeks where he's only had 2 double-digit fantasy games out of the last 4 is Xavier Worthy. Week 7 versus Vegas, carried 13 yards, 3 catches, 35 yards. Week 8 versus Washington, 5 catches, 53 yards, 7 targets. In Week 9 at Buffalo, 3 catches, 23 yards. So Week 10 they had the bye, obviously, was his Kansas City Chiefs team. Week 11, not a great matchup at Denver, one of the best defenses in the league. But I think during the bye week, they're going to find ways to get him that deep ball and get him on one-on-one coverage, obviously with attention going towards Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce in this lineup. And last season in the playoffs, this is where we saw Worthy excel and put up numbers where he was a deep ball threat and had the one-on-one coverage. So with all those factors, and his numbers haven't been great this season, he's definitely a player I will buy this week because I think there's still upside. Xavier Worthy. Next player, Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. I mentioned this in other videos this season that Justin Jefferson, his numbers are still solid on the year, but he's not putting up elite numbers where he's going 25, 30 points. His best game this season was going all the way back to Week 4 where he had 22 fantasy points in that game, but he hasn't reached 20 points at any other point this season in fantasy football. So the last few weeks were Jefferson, like I said, he's putting up good numbers, but not elite numbers. Like I said, Week 8 at the Chargers, 7 catches, 74 yards. Week 9 at Detroit, 6 catches, 47 yards, a touchdown. And Week 10 versus Baltimore, had the 12 targets, but a pedestrian game, 4 catches, 37 yards. So Week 11 on paper, a good matchup versus the Bears. Give up the 3rd most fantasy points to wideouts on the season. And like I said, Justin Jefferson, he's too talented of a wide receiver for his numbers to be this down. I know quarterback play is nowhere close to where it was last season with McCarthy and Carson Wentz this season, where Sam Darnold and Jefferson were locked in from the get-go. So with all those factors, I still think Jefferson has a couple big games in him this season, and he's definitely a player to buy this week. The next player is Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. Zay Flowers, I know the numbers haven't been elite, but he's still been a steady receiver more weeks than not, where he's getting that 11, 12 fantasy points. But like I said, his ceiling hasn't been high the last few weeks. Is Zay Flowers. Lamar Jackson came back into the lineup. I think he's too talented of a wide receiver just to have those decent games. I know it's a run-first team, obviously, over there in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson running, Derrick Henry running as well. But I still think Flowers, he's leaving some points out there. And the next couple weeks, he has better matchups coming up. Week 8 versus the Bears, 7 catches, 63 yards, 9 targets. Week 9 at the Dolphins, 5 catches, 64 yards. And Week 10 at Minnesota, 4 catches, 75 yards. So we know he's a big play type of wide receiver. Is Zay Flowers. He could go out there, he could run routes, he could burn a secondary. Week 11 at Cleveland, and Week 12 versus the Jets, and Week 13 versus Cincinnati coming up. So 3 pretty good matchups, in my opinion, here coming up for Zay Flowers. So like I said, he's still putting up wide receiver back end 2 numbers, but with easier matchups coming up and this team getting healthier, I think he could go out there and we can see even more. Next player, Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So Courtland Sutton, it's been an alright season for him, but he's been on this buy low list the last few weeks, and his numbers the last month of the season, every week, his points per game had dropped down. Week 7 versus the Giants, 6 catches, 87 yards, a 2-point conversion. Week 8 versus the Cowboys, 4 catches, 67 yards. Week 9 at Houston, a catch, 30 yards, a touchdown. And week 10 versus the Raiders, only 3 catches, 24 yards to Courtland Sutton. Like I said, every week in the last month of the season, his numbers have gone down, unfortunately, for this Denver Bronco team. But Sutton, I still think, is a big play type of wide receiver. He could go on there and make plays. But this offense, they're just too inconsistent. There's a lot of games this season we've seen Bo Nix go out there and not get much done early on, and then they got to play catch-up. But still, even with those catch-up and come from behind victories for this Denver Bronco team, Sutton really hasn't been involved over the last month of the season. So right now, while the numbers are down and the targets are down, he's definitely a wideout I would go out there and buy. I know Troy Franklin's getting more work in this offense. Dobbins and Harvey, it's been a good 1-2 combo over there, obviously, for this Denver Bronco team. But this offense, they got to find ways to get things going early and often in these ball games. And I think versus Kansas City, they're going to have to set the tone early. And it's a tough matchup, so Will Sutton struggled in the last couple weeks. He's a buy low play this week. Let's play Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Jake Ferguson, it's been a solid year for him, no doubt about it. But the last couple weeks since CeeDee Lamb got back to the starting lineup for Dallas, obviously the targets are going to go down. And also as well, with George Pickens over there having a great first season with Dallas, Ferguson's target's going to go down. So with those factors, and Ferguson, the last few weeks here, really struggling to put up points and do much for fantasy owners. He's definitely a buy low player this week. So from week 2 all the way to week 7, he was the best tight end in fantasy football in points per game, was Jake Ferguson. Then week 8 at Denver, 1 target. No, he had a goose egg. And then week 9 versus Arizona, only 5 catches, 50 yards, and a fumble loss. So Jake Ferguson, like I said, him and Dak Prescott have a good rapport. He's been a big part of this offense for the last couple seasons. Got a nice contract extension in training camp. And we saw he had first 5-6 weeks of the season, a big season, was Jake Ferguson. So right now with the Cowboys on bye, and like I said, the last 2 games he hasn't done much. Ferguson, to me, is a buy low candidate. He's still a tight end that's going to put points up. Obviously not the elite type numbers, but still weekly, I think 5 top 10 option at the tight end position. And right now, while he's struggling and coming off bye, he's a player we'll buy this week in the final play of DK Metcalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know Metcalf, you don't get a lot of targets. I know the numbers have definitely been way down over the last few weeks here for DK Metcalf, but we know he's a big play wide receiver, and he's got a couple good matchups coming up. Week 11 versus Cincinnati, that can't stop anyone, and week 12 with the Bears, that give up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. So the last few games for Metcalf, 3 out of 4, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. Week 8 versus Green Bay, 5 catches, 55 yards, a touchdown. Week 9 versus the Colts, 2 catches, 6 yards. And Week 10 at the Chargers, 3 catches, 35 yards. He's struggling mightily. And him and Rodgers got to get in sync, get back on the same page, where early in the season, Metcalf was putting up numbers, but of late, doubling and even triple teaming him at times is DK Metcalf. So like I said, someone else has to step up in the tight end, the receiving room for the Steelers team, but obviously they haven't, and that's why Metcalf is getting all this coverage his way, and it's tough to beat double, triple coverage, but I still think he could go out there and produce. That's a few players I look to buy and trade for week 11 of the fantasy football season.